This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Winnipeg police say they shot and killed a man yesterday during a hostage situation in West Broadway. That man, police say, was also a suspect in the death of a missing trucker from British Columbia who disappeared 1 week ago here in Winnipeg. CBC's Sabina Ahmed breaks down what we know.
Dozens of officers outside, a hostage situation inside. Winnipeg police blocked streets around this West Broadway apartment Thursday afternoon. A man had taken a 19-year-old woman into a third-floor suite against her will.
We'd reason to believe the male that retreated was armed.
Police say another woman, a man and a child were also inside Furby Street apartment. The man escaped off the balcony and the woman and child were released. Just after 5, police broke down the door and went inside.
The female hostage was secured and safely taken into care. The male hostage taker was shot by police during the rescue, and he died at the scene.
It was tense hours for the people living in the block. Dennis Colored has lived here for more than a decade.
About 1 in the afternoon, started with a whole bunch of screaming. And I ended up looking through the peephole and saw a police officer walking down the hallway. And from there, it just started banging on the door, and it very quickly escalated from there. Hear a man screaming, yelling, and a woman screaming along with him, I guess she was trying to get out of the apartment.
Police say the hostage taker was known to them.
He is a 52-year-old male. He had an extensive criminal record for violence and weapons offenses. He was on a few weapons prohibitions at the time of this offense.
This was not the first time police were at the building this week. On Wednesday, officers were there investigating a homicide on the 5th floor.
The hostage taker is considered a person of interest for that homicide.
The homicide victim is a 34-year-old truck driver, Farah Mohammed. He was reported missing on December 22nd after making a delivery from Vancouver to Winnipeg. His body was found on Boxing Day inside the same apartment block. No arrests have been made in connection to his death, and the homicide unit is investigating. Sabina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, now to the story of a Winnipeg man who got to see the home that he grew up in. It also happens to be the first social housing complex in Manitoba, and CBC News got to go along with him. The I-Team's Caroline Bargout has the story.
I've never knocked on my own door before.
This is where Laurie Mulvaney spent his childhood.
Well, this place has changed.
This house is now the Gilbert Park Resource Centre, but in 1963, this place was home. Mulvaney lived here with his parents and 6 siblings.
We were the first people to move into this neighborhood. I think we were the first people in public housing. My father worked for the Department of National Defense. I had 6 siblings, and a family of 9 gets a little weighty on one check, right?
The walk down memory lane was an emotional one for Mulvaney.
They put me on the counter. Sorry.
He remembers nearly dying in this kitchen after getting whooping cough as a child. The memory is a difficult one, but overall, he loved living here.
The first few years were like paradise. It was like everybody knew each other, everybody interacted. If somebody needed to be found, all you'd have to do is put out the word, that kid would be running home in 5 minutes,
Housing was in short supply in the 1960s, let alone affordable apartments, so the province decided to create the first public housing complex in Manitoba. Gilbert Park is a 254-unit complex that houses over 1,000 people. Before public housing, this historian says low-income earners were forced to live in unregulated rooming houses.
And if they can't afford to buy decent market housing, what they do is they live in places that are unsafe. They cut back on what they feed their kids. They take in the boarders. They're cramped. It's unhealthy situations that arise.
Doug Smith says Manitoba was one of the last provinces to take advantage of federal funding to build social housing units, but eventually did in the 1960s. By the 1970s, the cost of social housing was split between the feds and the provinces. In that decade, 11,187 units were built in Manitoba, the largest expansion in social housing the province had ever seen, and the largest to date. Things have slowed down since then. A CBC analysis found that in the last 7 years, only 287 new social housing units were created in Manitoba. At the same time, 374 units were sold to the private sector. Patricia Cook and her 3 kids moved into Gilbert Park in the 1980s.
You used to be able to leave your doors unlocked. That's how good it was in here. Now, no, it's not safe. You can't even walk around here at night without somebody wanting to knock your teeth out. That's how bad it is.
According to Manitoba Housing Calls from January 2020 to October 2023, almost 50,000 calls were made to security. Over 8,000 of those calls were made in the Gilbert Park area. The province is promising to work with the federal government and nonprofit organizations to protect the existing social housing units in Manitoba at a time when affordability and housing are issues.
He put a tire down on the ground around it.
While Gilbert Park has changed, Laurie Mulvaney remembers this place fondly.
But he planted this here in 1963.
His father planted this tree in the 1960s, and it's still here today. That gives him hope this neighborhood could become a community again, like it used to be. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Ukrainian leaders in Winnipeg say they are overwhelmed by support pouring in for a Ukrainian widow and her 2 teenagers. Their husband and father, Ivan Rubinik, was fatally stabbed walking to work just before Christmas. The family escaped the war in Ukraine just a few months ago. An online fundraiser has so far raised more than $92,000 for the family. But the Ukrainian Canadian Congress says others have been giving cash as well.
Donating is the only way we're going to help her. You can only give her so much food. You can only help her so much physically. But financially, that's what's going to give the children an education. That's going to help her pay for her rent.
Joanne Lewandowski says someone handed her $100 on her way home from Costco just last night. She says, given the interest, the UCC will start accepting donations of cash and checks for the family next week. Well, with New Year's just around the corner, many people in Winnipeg will be planning a ride to celebrations, to and from those celebrations this New Year's Eve. But how they get there may be a bit different from years past. CBC's Cameron McLean now on the shifting landscape in the local vehicle for hire market.
And I bought this car strictly for Uber.
Hart Macklin has been driving for Uber since they first came to Winnipeg 3 years ago.
It was a very slow process, getting customers, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's getting better.
Uber began operating in Winnipeg in the summer of 2020. For the first couple of years, taxis continued to provide the vast majority of rides. But a new report from the city shows that has changed. The report breaks down the number of trips by taxis versus personal transportation providers, which is mostly rideshare services, but also includes limousines. Last year, taxis gave 2/3 of vehicle for hire trips. This year, taxis and rideshare services are almost 50-50. Hart Macklin has noticed the increasing popularity of Uber, but he says it's still not as high as he would expect.
Most people who use Uber here in Winnipeg have used it in other cities when they traveled or they were from another city. Most of the Winnipeggers that are here really don't know much about it, don't even know it's here, a lot of them.
The city's vehicles for hire manager says the overall market has grown as people's driving habits shift.
The cost of owning a vehicle can be extremely expensive for people, and in a world where there's rising inflation, people have to choose.
If the current trend continues, rideshare apps could overtake taxis as the dominant player in the market next year. There are other options for people looking for a ride on New Year's Eve. Operation Red Nose offers free rides from volunteers who will drive your vehicle to your destination. And Winnipeg Transit is offering free rides from 7 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
RCMP are investigating a man's death in Poplar River as a homicide. Police were called to a home in the community just after 8 last evening. They say a 26-year-old man was found dead there. Police have not said how he died, but they do say that a 28-year-old woman has been arrested and faces a charge of manslaughter. The Major Crimes Unit is investigating. Now to the World Juniors now, where Canada fell to Sweden 2-0 at the championship in Gothenburg, Sweden today. Noah Ostlund scored the winning goal late in the second period.
Now Wahlberg walks in. Dropped off, looking at Mackie. Long shot. We saw Sandy going to score. Noah Ostlund pokes it home, and Sweden takes a 2-0 lead.
It was the first loss of the tournament for Canada, which earlier beat Finland and Latvia. Sweden also won its previous 2 games and now has the top spot in Group A. Playing in front of thousands of their fans, the Swedes haven't allowed a single goal in 3 games now. Canada's next preliminary round game is against Germany on Sunday.
Weather update is brought to you by the Art and Beauty of the National Ballet of Ukraine. January 29th at the Burton Cummings Theatre. Tickets at nationalballetukraine.com.
And that leads us to a look at your weekend weather forecast, your New Year's forecast as well. Another sunny day here in the south. We did see a little bit of flurry activity through central and northern Manitoba. Looking at satellite radar, mainly clear skies tonight for most of Manitoba. We do see that cloud, though, through the Interlake, through the Parkland region, and into northern Manitoba. A few flurries through parts of the north. We can expect that to move a little bit further south as we look at your futurecast. We can see by the time we start the day on Saturday, we do see some flurry activity through basically Portage La Prairie, east into northwestern Ontario. Areas like the Interlake and into the Whiteshell could expect some flurries as well through the morning. As we get through the rest of the day tomorrow, we're expecting that to clear out and a mainly clear sky for Saturday heading into Sunday, when we will expect a mainly sunny sky across much of the province. A little bit of fair weather cloud once again as we head into your New Year's Eve. -7 in Winnipeg right now under a mainly clear sky. Pressure is falling across the province. Temperatures hovering around the freezing mark in the south. A little bit cooler in the north, where we have seen some of that flurry activity today. But the story tomorrow and into the day on Sunday going to be the winds. As we look tonight, winds pick up in the Red River Valley, gusting up to 40 or 50 by the time we get into Saturday, and calming down as we get into the day on Sunday. Tonight in Winnipeg, we're looking at temperatures of -7, -9s to the west, -11 in the Pas, -14 with some flurries in Thompson tonight, -10 tomorrow, and we're expecting some sunshine in Brandon, -4, and -6 in Winnipeg. I'll have your New Year's forecast coming up in a little bit. Overseas now, where Ukraine says Russia has launched one of the biggest aerial attacks since the war started almost 2 years ago. It targeted cities across the country overnight, including the capital of Kyiv. At least 30 people were killed and more than 100 injured. Julia Wong has the latest.
Wave after wave of missiles and drones, relentless attacks from Russia. The most by air since the start of the war, Ukraine's military says. This was a scene in Zaporizhia, where a residential neighborhood was hit. One of several civilian locations, now sites of horror. The strikes hit a maternity ward, warehouses, and a shopping mall. I think they knew what they were hitting, one woman says. They hit with precision. That precision buried this man in the rubble. Emergency crews worked furiously to free him. In a video message, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was defiant, saying, "We will respond to Russian terrorists for every strike." Russia's Ministry of Defense says they hit their intended targets, claiming they were military sites. The strikes are a reminder for Ruslan Misunya, who lives in Kharkiv, of what it was like when the war began.
When you wake up because of the explosions, and again, that was the massive attack, I can tell you definitely that the mood and the atmosphere here in Kharkiv is that we will survive.
The war has been dragging on for nearly 2 years, and in recent months, Western military support and funding has been waning. This expert says the Kremlin is taking advantage of that.
There's still no consolidated vision of what a Ukrainian victory would mean. And so I think that the Kremlin is capitalizing on this uncertainty.
One thing that is certain, the request from Ukraine for help. This is yet another sign for our partners to strengthen Ukraine with the required amount of air defense, says Ukrainian Air Force spokesperson Yuri Ignat.
In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden is again pleading with a divided Congress to approve another aid package for Ukraine in the new year. And here in the UK, the government says it's sending 200 air defense missiles and vowing to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Julia Wong, CBC News, London.
Egypt is making fresh attempts to arrange a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad officials were in Cairo today discussing details of a three-phased plan. Both militant groups have so far rejected a proposed ceasefire. Meanwhile, Israeli forces are pressing further into southern Gaza. This is the scene after a deadly airstrike overnight in Rafah as rescuers scramble to save people trapped in the rubble. The area is overwhelmed with Palestinians who are fleeing the fighting. The United Nations estimates about 850,000 people are crammed into the area, triple the normal population. The war has displaced about 85% of Gaza's population of 2.2 million residents. Another U.S. state has barred Donald Trump from appearing on the state's primary election ballot. Maine is trying to disqualify the Republican president frontrunner because of his actions on January 6, 2021. That is the day Trump's followers stormed the U.S. Capitol after hearing him speak. The Maine Secretary of State accuses Trump of using, quote, incendiary rhetoric.
The U.S. Constitution does not tolerate an assault on our government, on the foundations of our government. And the Maine election law and the Constitution required, indeed obligated me to act.
Maine now joins Colorado in trying to knock Trump off a state primary ballot. It seems likely that the U.S. Supreme Court, though, will make the final decisions. Well, the new year begins on Monday, but people in New York had a special opportunity today to say goodbye to 2023.
We are saying goodbye to 2023 for Good Riddance Day here in Times Square. Devontae, make 2023 disappear. Wow.
It's the 17th anniversary of Good Riddance Day in Times Square. Passerby encouraged to write down any of the negative things that have happened in the previous 12 months, including bad memories, experiences. They hand them over, and a magician works his magic, and poof, they disappear and are gone forever into a new year. Still ahead tonight, we'll meet a Winnipeg breakdancer and find out why to him his moves are more than just musical, they're spiritual. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. And now the latest in our special series produced by a team of aspiring teenage filmmakers. They're all taking part in Create, an entertainment and arts training program at Sisler High School. Today's students Evan Rivard, Patrick Della Cuesta, and Sean Mofero reveal the passion behind the moves of Winnipeg breakdancer Mookie. Here now is their story.
I think just everybody has their certain thing, and for me, art was always like in my life. Art was always kind of like a path that was the only thing that felt like right for me. So this might be the only chance I have of ever doing anything in my life. So the way that you break is different, the moves that you create are different, the risks you're willing to take are different. So I absolutely want to teach that to people.
When you start talking while I'm staring through the sights, if I lost it all tomorrow, they be gone by the night.
Name's Della Uya. I'm also known as Mookie Winoe. I've been breaking for 16 years, and it's always been a part of my life. Started breaking when I was 14. I just entered high school. I didn't really have any friends, but saw a bunch of people breaking on stage, and I was like, that looks pretty cool. I went to go ask them to teach me. My sensei, B-Boy Rabbit Face, he always taught me that I needed to have style, and when you have style, you have to have a level of conviction. You almost have to believe the movements that you're creating for yourself. So you have to kind of come up with some sort of meaning to justify what you're committing to. So once I started creating my own movements, I kind of just decided that certain moves would mean certain things. And then in doing that, I found myself expressing myself that way. So for example, when my cousin passed, breaking was kind of the thing that I went to express myself. And many things happened in my life. I would say a really big one would be the poverty of growing up in the West End. Moments happen where you're kind of what do I do? And you sit there in the catharsis of the emotions. But because I had breaking, I was able to go down to my basement and cry it out, but also create some moves and representation of that. In hip hop, there's a really big statement, or a part of it, it's each one teach one. So in learning the tradition of hip hop, I kind of put myself in a place where I also have to also learn it and someday be able to teach it.
All right, so what I want you to focus on is this leg when it comes around. I want you to make a move as you're swinging it around to block. Perfect. I'm proud. I'm very proud. Very proud. Respect. You're doing really good. Respect. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. Let's go back.
Hip hop is a spiritual movement. It is a dance. It is a rap. It is a sound. It is all these different things. But before anything, it's the knowledge, and with the knowledge comes that spiritual freedom of being able to express yourself. So I absolutely want to teach that to people.
Keep practicing. Work hard. Achieve what you want to achieve. Don't forget your passion. You guys have real potential to be really good at this. So keep going.
Coming up after the break, I'll have your 7-day and your New Year's forecasts. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. All right, let's take a look at your New Year's forecast for New Year's Eve. If you're heading out, you're going to want to bundle up a little bit because about 9-10 p.m. we're looking at temperatures at around -14 under a partly cloudy sky. Winds, though, staying relatively light. And for your New Year's Day, -1 with a southwest wind at 15 through the afternoon. So I mentioned we could see some flurries through the day tomorrow, -6 in Winnipeg, -7 the forecast high on Sunday. And then we're looking at temperatures really sliding down to a little more seasonal for this time of the year as we get toward the middle and the end of next week. And not a lot of precipitation either. A mix of sun and clouds as we get into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week with highs of -9 degrees. And that is our program for this evening, our final newscast of 2023. Thank you so much for being with us this entire year and for trusting us to keep you informed, entertained, and of course connected. You're seeing some of our best photos from our videographers and our reporters behind me here. And you know, it's been a year. It's hard to sum it up. I don't have a lot of time. Full of ups and downs, of course, some incredible highs like the Grey Cup, and of course tragedies that can even leave some of the toughest of us at a loss for words. So thank you for sharing your stories with us and for allowing us to share them with you. I hope 2024 is great. I am looking forward to spending a lot more time with you and with Janet here at 6, starting early in the new year. With that, I hope you have a safe and happy new year, and we will see you in 2024. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday.